There's a particular kind of silence that surrounds someone who has been underestimated. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that accumulates, layer by layer, when you've offered your best to someone who wasn't paying attention. When you've shown up, given, stretched yourself in ways you didn't even fully acknowledge at the time, and the person on the receiving end just didn't see it. Or maybe they saw it and didn't know what to do with it. Either way, you were left standing in that silence wondering if something was wrong with you. If you're here today, I think some part of you is still carrying a residue of that. And I want you to know, before we even go deeper into this energy, that what I'm already feeling around whoever is drawn to this reading is someone who was never the problem. You were never the problem. Let's move into what the energy is showing me right now. The first thing that comes through, and it comes through strongly, is this image of someone waking up. Not waking up from sleep. Waking up from something more disorienting than that. Like you've been walking through life for a stretch of time with a certain story playing in the background. A story about yourself that wasn't entirely yours to begin with. Maybe it was seeded by someone who didn't treat you with the care you deserved. Maybe it grew slowly out of repeated moments where you felt overlooked. Whatever the origin, there's been a quiet internal narrative running, something about whether you're enough, whether you were right to want what you wanted, whether the love or recognition you were seeking was even real or reasonable to hope for. And what I'm seeing now is that the veil on that story is lifting. This feels like a gradual awakening rather than a sudden one. Some of you have been in this realization process for months. Others, it may have been triggered more recently, a conversation, a piece of news about someone from your past, a moment where you looked in the mirror and something clicked that hadn't clicked before. However it arrived, the clarity that is coming through in this energy is profound. It's the kind of clarity that doesn't reverse. Once you see something this clearly, you can't unsee it. What you're waking up to is your own worth. I know that sounds simple. But the emotional experience of it is anything but. Because here's what I'm picking up beneath the surface, this isn't just an intellectual realization. You've probably known your worth on some level for a while. Many of you are thoughtful, self-aware people. You've read the books, done the journaling, talked to your friends. The words have been there. What's happening now is different. This is the feeling catching up with the knowing. This is the moment where something inside your chest actually believes it, not just recites it. And that gap between knowing something and truly feeling it? That gap is where most of the quiet suffering has been living. Does this feel familiar? That experience of telling yourself you're going to be okay, while a deeper part of you is still grieving something you hadn't fully named. There's a layer here about pain, and I want to sit with this for a moment because I feel it's important. Whatever you went through, whether it was a relationship that ended in confusion, a connection that made you feel dismissed, a situation where you gave energy that was never honored, there was real pain in that. I'm not going to minimize it by rushing past it. The energy isn't asking you to rush past it either. What I'm seeing is a process of transformation that required going through that pain, not around it. It almost feels like someone who walked through fire and came out the other side not bitter, but refined. That distinction matters. Because there are two ways to survive heartbreak or disappointment. One leaves you hardened and closed. The other, and this is what I see in this energy, leaves you more knowing. More rooted. More authentically yourself than you were before. Some of you went through something that should have broken you. By external measures, it probably looked like it did for a while. You may have withdrawn. You may have gone quiet in ways that concerned the people around you. You were processing. You were alchemizing something heavy into something else entirely. And the version of you that is emerging from that process is not the same person who entered it. I want to be clear about something, and this feels important to say, the strength I'm seeing isn't the performative kind. It's not the "I'm fine" kind. It's the kind that comes from having sat alone with yourself in honest moments and made a choice, over and over, to keep going. To keep growing. Even when no one was watching. Even when it felt thankless. Especially then. Now here's where the energy becomes really interesting. And I want you to stay with me here because this part has layers. Someone is watching you. It almost feels like something has been developing behind the scenes for a while now. Someone from your past, and for many of you, I feel this is someone you had real feelings for, someone you had a genuine energetic connection with. This person has been in an observation phase. They have been watching the version of you that is emerging. And I don't mean watching in an intrusive way. I mean that they are becoming aware. Aware of who you are. Aware of what they had. Aware of what they didn't honor when they had the chance. This is interesting because the awareness isn't comfortable for them. There's a kind of reckoning happening on their end too. I'm sensing someone who is having to sit with some accountability, not because anyone is forcing them to, but because the contrast has become undeniable. The contrast between who you are now and how they treated you then. Between the life you are building and the version of you they took for granted. Between the emotional depth they overlooked and what they can now see clearly that they missed. And there is something almost painful for them in that recognition. Not painful in a way that generates sympathy from me, just yet, but painful in the way that truth is painful when you've been avoiding it. They are coming into contact with a version of themselves they probably don't love. The version that didn't recognize a good thing. The version that was too caught up in something, fear, avoidance, pride, immaturity, distraction, to show up the way they should have. You're not imagining this energy. If something in you has been sensing that there's been a shift in how someone from your past sees you, that intuition is likely not wrong. Take what resonates here, because this is a collective reading and not every piece will land for everyone in the same way. But for those of you who feel this applies, let's go deeper. What's coming through now is something about this person's inner world, and it's layered. On the surface, they may appear to have moved on, or to have their life together, or to be unbothered. But beneath that surface, and this is where the real energy lives, there's a confrontation happening with themselves. A confrontation with truth. I'm hearing something like, a person talking themselves out of reaching out. Going back and forth. Picking up their phone and then putting it down. Not because they don't feel anything, but because they don't know how to approach what they feel. There's a mixture of emotions on their end that feels genuinely complex. There's regret. There's admiration, the kind they're not sure they've earned the right to express. There's something that might be longing. And underneath all of it, there's a question they keep circling back to: is it too late? What I want to say to you, not to them, but to you, is that this is not your burden to carry. Their internal process is theirs. Your job is not to make it easier for them to come back. Your job is not to wait, or to signal availability, or to soften your edges so they feel comfortable approaching. What you're being called to right now is something far more significant than that. You're being called to continue becoming. This is where something shifts in the energy. And I want you to feel this shift, not just hear it. Because up until now we've been talking a lot about what was lost, what was unrecognized, what someone else failed to see. And all of that is real and valid. But the energy is moving forward now, and so must you. There is something genuinely transformational happening in your life that is not about them at all. You have been growing in ways that are almost hard to articulate. It's like, have you ever looked back at a version of yourself from 2 or 3 years ago and barely recognized who that person was? Not because they were bad, but because you've gone through so much since then that you've shed layers you didn't even realize you were carrying? That's what I'm feeling here. There's been a karmic evolution happening for you that has fundamentally changed what you understand about yourself, about relationships, about what you're willing to accept and what you're not. And part of what's emerged from that evolution is a standard. A quiet, internal standard that you may not even have put into full words yet, but that lives in your body now. A felt sense of what you deserve. What real love feels like versus what it doesn't. What genuine respect looks like versus its imitation. You went through something that made you intimately familiar with the difference, and now you carry that knowledge everywhere you go. That's not a wound anymore. That's wisdom. Some of you are standing at a threshold right now. Not necessarily a dramatic one. Life doesn't always announce its turning points with fanfare. Sometimes they look like an ordinary Tuesday where you realize you haven't thought about someone the way you used to. Or a moment where an opportunity appears and you say yes, when the old you would have hesitated. Or simply a morning where you wake up and something feels lighter without a clear reason. That's what thresholds often look like. Quiet. Interior. Undramatic from the outside. But the energy here is saying, something is being rebuilt. And I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't want to create a passive expectation. What's being rebuilt is not just being handed to you. It's being built by you, through the choices you're making, through the ways you're showing up for yourself, through the courageous decision to keep your heart open even after it was handled carelessly. That openness, I need to pause on that because I feel it strongly. You could have closed. A lot of people do, after what you went through. And no one would have blamed you. But there's an emotional bravery in this energy that I find genuinely striking. You kept the door of your heart open, not naively, not without discernment, but deliberately. As a choice. As an act of defiance against the part of you that wanted to wall everything off and never feel that kind of thing again. That choice has spiritual weight. It's going to matter. Now, and this is where I want to be very intentional with the energy, because it's nuanced, there is a possibility of reconnection in this reading. I want to address it honestly rather than sensationalize it. For some of you, this will mean reconnection with a specific person. There's an energy of divine timing around a particular connection that doesn't feel finished. Not because of unresolved pain, but because there's something genuinely between you and this person that transcends the circumstances that separated you. Something that both of you have been unable to fully release. A soul-level recognition that keeps resurfacing no matter how much time passes or how much distance was created. But I want to say this clearly, and this feels important, the reconnection I'm seeing, if it comes, will look different than what came before. It cannot be a return to old patterns. It cannot be a repeat of the dynamic where you gave and they received without reciprocating. What I'm seeing is that any reunion that actually serves your highest good will require a different foundation than the one you had. More honesty. More accountability on their part. More mutual recognition. And critically, you will need to be discerning enough to know the difference between someone who has genuinely done the work and someone who is simply reaching out because they miss the feeling of you rather than the reality of you. Those are two very different things. One is growth. The other is nostalgia. You have enough wisdom now to distinguish between them. At first this might look like the same person returning. But looking deeper, it feels more like the question will be whether they're returning as a new version of themselves or a more polished version of the old dynamic. And your intuition, which has gotten sharper through everything you've been through, will know the difference. There's more to this than it first appeared. I'm picking up on something about communication specifically. For some of you, there may be a conversation on the horizon. Words that haven't been spoken yet but are forming. An attempt to bridge something, to address what went unsaid, to acknowledge what wasn't honored, to open a channel that was closed. This conversation, if it comes, may feel like it has potential. And it may have genuine potential. What I want to say about it is this: you don't have to have your response prepared in advance. You don't have to know what you'll say or how open you'll be. What you do need to go into it with is a clear sense of yourself. because the energy I'm seeing is that this conversation, and the energy around any reconciliation in general, will only lead somewhere meaningful if you enter it as the person you are now. Not the person who was waiting to be chosen. Not the person who shrunk herself to fit someone else's comfort zone. The full, clear, evolved version of you who knows her worth and isn't willing to negotiate it away. The energy is beginning to settle now, and I want to bring it in gently. What I feel as we close is a kind of groundedness that wasn't present at the beginning of this reading. If you've been sitting with this for the past few minutes, something may have shifted slightly in your chest, a small release, a quiet recognition. That's the energy doing what it's meant to do. Where you are headed is not a return to who you were before all of this. And honestly, I wouldn't want that for you even if it were possible. Who you were before was beautiful, but who you are becoming is something that the best parts of who you were before could only dream of. You have depth now that was forged rather than given. You have clarity that was earned rather than assumed. You have love for yourself that no one handed you, you grew it yourself, in difficult soil, with inconsistent sunlight. Let that be enough for right now. Let this moment be enough. If something is meant to come back to you, whether that's a person, an opportunity, a version of a connection that is now more whole, it will come back in a form that honors you. And if it doesn't come in that form, your intuition will recognize it clearly enough to protect you. You've already done the hardest work of becoming someone who knows the difference. Whatever comes next, and something is coming, the energy is clear about that, meet it as the full version of yourself. Not the version who was waiting to be recognized. Not the version who needed external confirmation to feel real. The version who already knows. Because you already know. And quietly, somewhere in you, you always did.